Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome to Frank Analysis. I am your host, Franco. I'm joined today by my good friends here, Jack and just some guy, aka Polly. It's good to have you guys on here. And we're here to talk about anti war and pro peace principles. And we're going to be using a lot of examples from what's currently happening right now, the big conflict between Russia, NATO, Ukraine, things that are happening in that region, what the people of the Donbass are experiencing. But I mean, we'll probably throw out in examples from history or current events that are happening, just to reference our principles that we're going to talk about here on anti-war. Um, but I want to start by asking both of you guys here. This first question here is, and that's being anti-war and anti-government, and calling out Russia, because when we point out some things that they do that may not be, moral, and we're gonna bring up examples too. Like, we're gonna show you guys some facts and stuff, and this doesn't mean that we don't stand with the people of the Donbass, and that also doesn't mean that we are pro U.S. You guys have followed this channel for a long time. I'm always calling out U.S. imperialism, but go ahead, Jack and Polly. Can you guys bring up just like some factual evidence of what's happening right now in that region?
Go ahead, Jack. Unless you want me to go first.
I'd say go ahead and go first on that one. I've got some thoughts, but I would definitely like to see where you would take this for sure.
All right. Um, so, happy Armistice Day. It is Today is Veterans Day as we know it here in the United States, but it is more commonly known as Armistice Day in Europe. Um, this was the day that, in the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, the armistice that ended the Great War, the war to end all wars, happened in 1918. We haven't really gotten farther than that state of consciousness. Like, we have significantly pigeonholed ourselves into that lizard brain fight or flight consciousness, unfortunately. And the same problems and contradictions that were facing us then, we are currently facing today. And I think that people tend to miss a lot what we're saying when we say that we don't stand with any nation state government, because it's a matter of being against an action that someone takes, not that it is this not being against the someone that took the action, but being principled against the actions that nation states and banks use to make money and gain more power, right? This is nothing new. This is something that's been happening for centuries. It's happened through the Age of Empires. It happened through the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, and it's still happening today. So, being anti-war and or pro-peace is a tradition that precedes the current conflict. War is a heinous and demonic creature that is used by ruling classes and the masters of mankind. This force is always used by those masters against the common people trapped in between, even turning the common people into the monsters into the monsters themselves with the bloodletting that is war. What I mean by that is people, regardless of whether they have anything to do with war or not, all suffer the consequences, right? This means the soldiers on both battlefields don't solely take all of the damage from war, right? Um, there's veterans whose children still face the consequences of their actions that happened in war, and it's really sad. It's fucking horrifying to see just people that had nothing to do with the conflict still be fucking feeling the pain. Right? We have intergenerational trauma, and we have intergenerational memory, and this is centuries building upon centuries, building upon centuries. And so the facades most commonly used by the forces of aggression, such as banks and nation states and weapons contractors and all that shit, are the facade that they usually use is one of either religious identity, ethnic identity, or national identity. In the religious entity realm, we have the Roman Catholic versus Eastern Orthodox, the Roman Catholic versus Protestant, matriarchal versus patriarchal pantheons, male or female shamanism, someone claiming to be the chosen people of God, sometimes when a god demands a blood sacrifice. Like, that's how these religious spooks develop and become the monsters that they are in people's minds. The ethnic identity is most often fleshed out in the civilized versus like uncivilized. Like, we're carrying the civilization torch with us, and we're gonna teach these savages how to live, kind of shit. But that goes back like as far as Roman versus barbarian and Greek versus the northern tribes. Like, this is a very, very old tradition of I guess ancient chauvinism that says we're the civilized people and we're going to teach you guys how to live. But it commonly comes out as like white saviorism in the tradition of like imperial acquisition, like Berlin Conference kind of shit. And then the Western civilized world, and the most of the bullshit in between. So that's often how ethnic tensions are tugged upon. It happens in Africa all the time. And here in the States, they still pit the native tribes against each other, like the Zuni and the Navajo tribes. Like, for some reason, they're told that they're supposed to hate each other still because of ethnic identity. And then there's national identity, and that's taken place since Greece and beyond, meaning that we are the chosen, the shining city on the hill, because we are the superior ideology and the superior government. And it's often coupled with ethnic identity and religious identity, but it's not. It doesn't need to be the case, right? But in its current iteration, it was theorized in 1860s Prussia, and has become the modern version of the nation state. Like, we have American flag worship and the great nation and the city on a shining hill and chauvinism in general, right? Like, this is kind of fucking new. Like, nationalism kind of started to become a thing right after the American Revolution and the French Revolution, but it didn't get its like final form until Prussia came out with it. And that's why everyone has the same schooling model. We have the same lower house and higher house government structure with an executive branch and like, they're all this. We live under a Prussian style world, right? Like, not just Western. Like, this is a very specific type of nation state identity kind of shit, and it always relies upon expansion because you are the great nation. And so all of these end up as organized crime circuits eventually. And given that we've had about 160-ish years to build upon this, like, it's really starting to become more and more apparent, I think, and self-evident. They're all ubiquitous in the terms of justification of censorship, national security obsession, production and growth worshiping, poisoning people through pipelining the entirety of its land acquisitions, the ecological destruction of an entire global system through oil rigging, deep sea mining, and drilling, mountaintop removal, deforestation, nuclear destruction, and an entire ecocide because of a refusal to live within the boundaries of nature in the pursuit of profits and unending growth. Now, this is not confined to just capitalism in the classical sense. It's a global system that is a symbiosis of capital and the state, what was termed fascism about 100 years ago. So all nations on this planet are obsessed with the production and development and running through resources to get us to the next level. It's very much a utopian idea. And that's the kind of like mass psychology and the sociology that we live under, because with nation states, and sometimes there's deviations in the severity of their involvement per region or the areas under the influence of that imperial power, but it's not anything new. This is very much an old game. It's just reached its crescendo with all the different organizations and hierarchies and institutions that we've created to buttress this one system of the nation state. So the people under attack in the Donbass and in that region in general are caught living on a strategic piece of land for trade routes and monetary value. If there was no return on the investment, there would be no investment in the war. The people that live in the combat zones, as well as those fighting through volunteering, mercenaries, and conscription, will be damaged for life if they make it out alive at all. People that had fuck all to do with the current conflict in the area. I must buttress that I am not. This is not a new place for there to be conflict, right? This is the battleground of empires and has been for thousands of years. Like, you have to look at the region and what it means for trade routes between the East and the West. You have to look at the region and find out what it means to be on the Black Sea. The same thing with the Panama Canal, the same thing with Egypt and the Suez Canal. Anywhere where there's a fucking river that runs trade routes north and south, that is a very
great example is UK.
Yeah, the UK. Like, you have to look at the region as it's divided up per the topography and the economic zones, right? It cannot be separated. Like, it's not just, and nothing is purely ideological. So
the people of the Donbass are being under attack right now because that is a strategical region. And it's been a region that's been under attack, used as a battleground for centuries, right? So let me ask both of you guys this: what is NATO's current geopolitical interest, and what is Russia's geopolitical interest? Let's lay out NATO's first and then Russia's.
Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's a great question. I think before I start on that real quick, I just want to just give a good definition of war. There's a great book called End of All Evil by Jeremy Locke. I highly recommend everyone read this. It's only 100 pages, and it's a great book. But here's what he says on war, and I agree 100% on this. War is the implementation of violence. It is the tool that evil uses to establish authority. All of history's wars have occurred because of a desire to implement a new authority over people. On the smallest scale, this occurs via a process of threat and acquiescence, such as the behavior of bullies, thugs, and mafias. On the largest scale, it occurs in violent multi-year battles, such as the behavior of nations and empires. So, like, right there, Jeremy Locke calling out exactly what war is. There's a great quote by Buckminster Fuller that the wars don't ever end. It's just the conditions that satisfied the former conqueror, or sorry, the latter person who actually was the person that actually conquered the lands, right? It's just those specific examples. As for NATO, I think it's pretty clear that, it's not pretty clear, but with NATO and Russian ambitions, like, it's like that to me personally, I would need to be able to, like, really study hard on that, but just going off the cuff, I mean, it's NATO. I personally would see NATO's interest is trying to push us as much as possible to load up the pockets of the defense industry for quote unquote preventative things like more nukes, more things like that they'll sell as deterrents, just like we did in the Cold War. So NATO, to me, I see as actually trying to make themselves appear to have a use. Because I think there was someone wrote something, I'm trying to remember what it was, but about how NATO itself was trying to figure out what their purpose was. And if I could find that document, I would love to share it. As for Russia itself, that is like a whole other thing for me that I would need to go down into to actually look into that. But what I will say is this: is that there's like war itself, like what Locke said. I mean, it's violence. Violence is evil. So for me, it's like looking at the Russian side of this. It's like it's hard because there's always some truth in a lot of the different types of propaganda we hear, right? Like, oh, well, Russia had to go do this because of what they were doing to the civilians in the Donbass, which guess what? They've been doing that since 2014. And when were people talking about that back then? Like right after the Maidan coup. And that's the kind of shit. It's like, okay, so, and then again, it can go into the Minsk, you could also cite the Minsk agreements as well, that they were violated by Zelensky. So that could be another thing that ties in the, I would call it almost a false dichotomy between NATO and Russia to an extent, because when you look at how all this stuff done, it's all wargaming. So it's like, why do nations do what they do? They do what they do to conquest. And that said, again, like looking at things like what symbols and sigils are we seeing on state broadcast? We're seeing imperial flags.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, so to try and pry apart NATO and Russian geopolitical interests is a little bit tough, but so NATO's an economic bloc, man. Like,
in terms of the region of Ukraine, what's their geopolitical interest of that in that region?
Okay, yeah. So like NATO, of course, needs to retain its hegemony, man. Like it always needs to. It's like any other world hegemon that's existed before, right? Like it just happens to be that technology's given us a little bit more of a unfair shot into the future. And made a world power a true global power. So they got to maintain their monopoly, their cartel, man. Like it's an economic military bloc, and that's how they fucking make money. They control the supply and they control the demand, and they control global pricing through that, and everything's traded through the dollar, right? So like, of course, NATO is going to do everything they can to maintain their world hegemony. Now, the reimposition of sanctions on Iran in like what 2018 was it that Trump did that? I don't fucking remember very well. But the reimposition of economic sanctions there destroyed a southern trade route that was going to be used on the Belt and Road or the New Silk Road, and the Central Asian route, I think is what it's called. So that forced that trade route to move north. And when it was proposed as the central trade route through Kazakhstan and through Armenia and Azerbaijan. Well, then we saw the fucking conflict kick up there too, right? We saw the Nagorno-Karabakh region go up in hot fucking flames. So that destroyed that fucking trade route. And it also cut Turkey out of the mix because, of course, there's instigation to keep the monopoly on the NATO hegemony, right? But then once the southern and the central trade routes were nixed because of conflict in the area, it moved north. And as it moves north, that means it's going through Donbass, Crimea, and pretty much anywhere that's east of Moldova. And that's to move Chinese goods to the European market, mostly. There's also plenty of pipeline stuff that's happening from Siberia and from the North Sea down to Central Asia and into the Turkey area and up from Baku as well. So this is a very like sweet spot for that region. And NATO is fully aware of what Sevastopol means for the old enemy, Russia. Sevastopol is the historical seat of the Black Sea Fleet, meaning Russia's naval power globally. So Russia must hold the Black Sea if it's going to be cut in on any of the fucking trade routes that are going from China into Europe. And so in 2014, they had to take Sevastopol, but now, because of the central and the southern trade routes being nixed, now they have to move it through the Donbass as well. And so we're going to have plenty more pipeline activity. We're going to have a shit ton more of like rail systems with fucking loaded cargo cars. There's going to be a whole lot of coal that's going to be moved from point A to point B because of what that means for, like, if you can charge coal with ethane, you can make hydrogen, and then you get to call yourself clean energy or whatever the fuck. So there's like a whole lot of economic interests in that area. And as far as the geopolitical interests go, I don't think you can separate that from economic interests. Like, I'm sorry, because there's banks on either side that are funding this conflict because they see a return on investment coming, right? Like, they're all into fucking the same type of industries. They just want to have their monopoly in place. It's just another cartel, man.
Think about this, you guys. This really just hit me. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street own the majority of most of the things going on, right? When it comes to war and stuff.
So let's lay that out for the people who may not know. Sorry, Jack. Vanguard Group, State Street, and BlackRock are firms that own every single industry. And the people who own Vanguard and State Street and BlackRock are just like a few individuals.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely, and they own. And again, like I'm not being hyperbolic. You can go look at the filing documents, and it'll show. I think there's like 10 to 20% shares of each company, and that. But sort of what I was getting at is that the tools of war, like kind of what Locke was speaking on earlier, is that it's like all of these wars. Like, I was just thinking, like, our global financial system is in the state that it's in right now, right?
Yeah.
They've got to hide a lot of stuff right now from people. Well, I guess you call it satanic ruling. I wouldn't even call them ruling. I would just call them the false authority of state, whatever you want to call it, need a way to almost kind of like launder different things. And so they can do that through the defense industry, through war, right? They can, like a great example, Shadow, is that bill that you reviewed. That money wasn't even going to Ukraine. That was just laundered. So when you think about it, they make money on both sides. They make money. It's just like with Iraq. They made the money destroying and absolutely horrendous cluster bombing and depleted uranium everywhere. And then they also made money contracting and sending over contractors to then go rebuild. And so you look at these dynamics, and it's like they can only hide the paper and the digital money so much. Through war, they can launder even more, because they can, like, think of World War II, all of the gold that was stolen and
the banks were funding both sides of that war.
Yep.
All sides.
And this isn't anything new either, in terms of something that just
nothing
happened
new under
in the 20th century.
Nothing.
This has been happening for centuries also, right? Banks or banking systems funding both sides of the war. Now, I just want to clarify here for everybody. So you guys are saying that Russia is not mainly in this to protect the people of the Donbass, but are you guys saying that that's an excuse that they use, but they have like a bigger goal that they're trying to achieve, which is a financial goal? Go ahead.
Most definitely. I have yet to see any war that didn't have some significant economic interest in it. And like, we've seen the ethnic conflict used all throughout history, dude. Like, I mean, do I believe in the German position for its war for existence? Right? Do I believe that in 1914, since we're on Armistice Day, do I believe that Germany has the right to unify its peoples under its one flag because they can't exist outside of their country? These are direct quotes from Putin himself, right? Like, so I'm taking primary source material here, but like, I don't believe that there's ever any interest to protect people. I think it's always about fucking making money. And as the dollar collapses, Like, it's in a debt bubble, right? All currencies are debt based now, right? And we've had world reserve currencies all throughout fucking since 1492. So as the dollar collapses, being the sixth or seventh monetary system to collapse, the contenders have emerged. One of them being the ruble, and one of them being the digital yuan. And seeing and taking it from that approach, and wondering if this is all, if there's a trade route that goes right through this region, and these two people stand to make a lot more money and hold a lot more assets and be able to move in on the fucking economic block that is NATO, as their currency, their manufactured currency. That should be very explained here, is that like economic blocks always manufacture a currency to keep them in power and common people not in power, right? So as a new contender for a world reserve currency, I mean, we're watching a building and a solidifying of position of just another cartel. Like, this has happened many, many times over history, right? And in 1914, the German fucking Austro-Hungarian people wanted to fucking move in on the British. The British pound was in collapse, and the dollar was a contender, but so was the Deutschmark. So it's very, if you look at things from the standpoint of economic and power monopolies through a certain region, and this time the region being the globe, I think it's very clear to see that this is just another invocation of something that is happening and being very opportunist and not letting a good crisis go to waste. I think. What do you think, Jack?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is like, if people following the Syrian conflict, we saw like we've seen footage. It's not to say, like, this is the really important part to me, is that for me it's the understanding that all of these different governments and states are just cartels. And once we realize that, we realize there is no quote unquote good guy or bad guy. And a lot of that stuff situationally. And it's so, like, an example I would give is like in Syria, yeah, you had Russian troops holding open and helping with human corridors. That's not to say that like everything Russia does is bad, everything the United States does is good, or any one of those false choices. It's really looking at this holistically and looking at the fact that war itself is immoral, and that should be a principle of everyone, I would hope. And so, like, basically what I'm kind of getting at is that it's so insane that we're dealing with the amount of propaganda that we're dealing with, large in part from 2012, from the what's the name of that bill? I'm the one that
Smith-Mundt Modernization Act.
Smith-Mundt Modernization, thank you, which legalized propaganda domestic. So, and again, I think everyone can recognize a spike after 2012 when the media just went absolutely even more batshit beyond the weapons of mass destruction and all that. So kind of what I'm getting at is I see a lot of like propagandistic takes on different things around these different conflicts, when for me it's the simple answer is I'm against any exploitation, violence, or killing of any person, period.
Yeah.
I don't care who they are, where they're from. I don't care, even if they hate me. Like, that's the thing. It's a principle. So if you have a principle of nonviolence, supporting any cartel in their efforts for any kind of war would just seem insane.
Yeah.
So there's many people in the alt media space, let's say, that are saying that Russia had to step in to protect the people of the Donbass, and that this is their main goal, is to protect the people of the Donbass. What if we point out Russia, like, what their main geopolitical interest is? That doesn't mean that we don't stand with the people of the Donbass. It doesn't mean that we're not suggesting that the people of the Donbass shouldn't protect themselves from being attacked. And also, why is it that Russia only stepped in now, 8 years later? Why didn't they do anything back in 2014?
That's my question,
ahead. You guys
Franco.
can ask. Yeah, you guys can answer that. Go ahead.
Yeah, because that's the thing to me, is like, so Russian intelligence would know that there's indiscriminate shelling of civilians going on, which is horrendous, by the way. And again, like, so they didn't act then, but again, like, I'm sure there's there's going to be reasons that, oh no, Putin had to wait for the Minsk agreement to be violated or something like that, which may very well be true. But kind of what I'm getting at is that you look at that and it's like, that excuse to me does not seem valid from the standpoint that if that truly is the cause, why did it not happen back when this shit was already happening? Like, media was completely silent on all this for sure, but why just now? Yeah, like that would be my question.
Like, I get wanting to believe that this is all about protection. Like, it's a much more comfortable space to be in. But I don't think it's very... I think it's far too simple.
You sent me like evidence, right, about why the main drive that Russia has is not mainly about protection, but that you use that as an excuse. But the main reason is geopolitical. You sent some speeches, right? You want me to pull some of that up?
Yeah, that's
okay. I have it here. So, signing of treaties is you want to go over this one?
Yeah. So, are you talking about the? Which one is that one?
Signing of treaties on accession of Donetsk and Lugansk People's
Republic. So, anytime there's a speech, I think people should read it rather than watch it on subtitles or whatever, because there's a certain degree of word magic that's used. The way that you present it, how you present it, that should all be analyzed as well. But I think reading a transcript, like, you can kind of see the pattern develop. At least, well, I can see the pattern develop of like however many paragraphs or sentences are used of the truth, and then a narrative inserted, and then the truth, and then a narrative inserted, because like every side has a narrative, right? But to be principled is to look through the narratives, all of them, and come out with something else on the other side. What is the actual truth, right? And what are some of the small beads of what their true intentions are? What are those being said, right? And so I think one of the most striking and alarming parts of that speech was the world has entered a period of fundamental revolutionary transformation. New centers of power are emerging. They represent the majority of the international community. They are ready not only to declare their interests, but also to protect them. They see in multipolarity an opportunity to strengthen their sovereignty, which means gaining genuine freedom, historical prospects, and the right to their own independent, creative, and distinctive forms of development to a harmonious process. The battlefield to which destiny and history have called us is a battle for our people, for the great historical Russia, and then there's applause, for the great historical Russia, for future generations, our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. We must protect them against enslavement and monstrous experiments that are designed to cripple their minds and their souls. Now, nothing really seems imposing until you get to the line where there's the applause, right?
Yeah.
Once the applause happens, it's historical great Russia, right? So what he means by that is when you hear great Russia, it's the unification of the Eastern Slavic peoples under one banner, and that one banner being Moscow's banner. And this is also an invocation of an ideology that made Muscovy that turned Muscovy from a small city state into a massive empire that stretched from Europe all the way to the Americas. Because remember, Russia did sell Alaska to the United States. So, like, when he's talking about Great Russia, what he's talking about is bringing back together a Russian empire. And an empire is all about economic interests. This is this is intentions laid bare, right? Because in the beginning of the conflict, the line was denazification and a buffer region, right? Returning Ukraine to the Ukraine, the borderland. And then everyone was saying that line was the truth, and I'm like, nah, they're going to annex everything because they need it for this particular economic region. And overnight, as a result of this speech, everyone forgot that the original line was denazification in a buffer region and became liberation instead. So, I mean, as soon as Russia invaded, that changed the game, right? Because I'm pretty sure we were all on the same page when Russia was just moving troops around inside their borders in January. And we were like, yeah, there's nothing going to happen. But as soon as it did happen, it changed the fucking game, man. Like,
and this is
and
not
now
to
we
say
hear
that NATO is not antagonizing the shit out of Russia right now. That is critical because
absolutely,
that's part of that dynamic. Right. And so again, that gives credence. But again, that's kind of what we're saying is that you can't just have one view, this side good, other side bad. It's very complicated. And again, when Shadow showed me this speech, I'd only heard it. When I started reading through it, it really became clear to me that there's a lot more going on that I did not know.
Yeah. So you're saying their narrative changed, and this speech is evidence of that. Because in the beginning, they were saying they're just going to move troops around, and they're doing this to denazify the region, and they're protecting their border. But now it's about annexation of the region.
Yes. Bringing together Great Russia. And when you look at the economic region that is Great Russia, you look at the entire northern Black Sea coastline, all the way through Bessarabia, and you see pretty much it's being able to expand their economic influence in a time of another currency collapsing because they offer an alternative currency, right? And as the US and EU and the UN and whoever the fuck else sanctions Russia, the stronger Russia actually fucking gets. Because if they're sanctioned, then they are forced into selling their product to the other sanctioned countries, right, in their own currency. And that develops an economic bloc, which is synonymous to the other economic bloc, right? So this is what multipolarity actually means. As soon as the line changed from we're just moving troops around into our border, everything got fucking flipped on its head. And now we are in a multipolar world. We have to start thinking like it's a multipolar world. What are the economic interests here? And this speech shows us that it's a reunification of all the Eastern Slavic peoples, right? And even before that, like in their little mini documentary, they were saying Donbass is Russia, Ukraine is Russia, and talking about Little Russia and New Russia or Novorossiya. These are all very historical terms because we're dealing with a military, imperial, nation state ideological complex that's existed for like 600 years, 700, 700 years. So no, 600. Sorry. But regardless, off in the weeds there. Sorry. He's talking about bringing back an old economic power. And I think it's rather evident as the ruble and the digital yuan gain global traction and NATO collapses. This is just a change of management. Like, I don't see this as becoming any more just, right? In that same speech, he said, what was it, neocolonialism and blah, 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 right? A lot of things to get the lizard brain excited to think that he's on your side, but I don't think he's on anyone. He's a billionaire, right? and there's Chinese billionaires too.
He
And you
has
don't become a
personal
fucking
selfish interests,
yes,
right?
like billionaires are billionaires are billionaires. Like you don't get to be a billionaire by actually fucking competing and being an entrepreneur. Like you have to cheat and lie and steal and murder. Like million, you can make a million, you can make a few million by being an entrepreneur and all that shit. But like, nah, man, these people are not like us.
So what do you
And
say? Sorry, go ahead and finish, and I'll ask. These people are
like
not like us.
these people are not like us, and people treat them like they're us, right? They're superheroes even, right? Like it's it's the geopolitical version of Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like people have chosen a superhero to take out the supervillain, and it's just that's not the case. We're watching something entirely different form. Like, and I don't think it's really good to throw your hat in the ring
Like a
with
Game
those
of Thrones.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like real life. It's like an interactive version of Game of Thrones, and you get to pick which one you're gonna put on the
And
fucking
the
Iron
people
Throne.
who were really in charge in the Game of Thrones were the banks, remember?
Yeah,
Well, you had
Like-
the Iron Bank, but also you want to know
Yeah.
what I realized on Game of Thrones? The quote unquote enemies of all the people were the people themselves. They were all their own worst enemies. Like,
Yeah,
again, we could go into fandom, but like when you look at like Cersei, the Red Wedding.
yeah, yeah. But
and
that's really like to not get too far off into the weeds. But yeah, that's a very good analogy. Is that this is the game of the global throne, right?
yeah.
I mean, come on, dude. We used to all say New World Order and like, and it made people shudder, and then it became fucking co-opted, right? And they're like, yeah, that New World Order shit's not cool, man. Fuck all that New World Order shit. We should have a fair world order.
Let's hold that thought for a bit. We'll come back to that in terms of like who rules the world right now.
Yeah.
And this Game of Thrones that's happening right now between these big superpower countries. And I want to ask you guys, what do you say in response to people that say, so what do you want to do? You just want to let the people of the Donbass, the Donetsk and Donbass regions, you just want to let them get shelled? What do you say in response to that?
The only power that I truly have is to disarm those fucking shells, because we all know where those fucking shells are coming from. And that money is being stolen from me. It's being stolen from you. It's being stolen from Jack. We're all a fucking slave to that fucking industry. So my only true fucking responsibility, and the only thing I can truly do, is to disarm those fucking people here. That's my power. My power is not to throw my hat in the ring with another fucking cartel. Like, I think that's a shortcut to a wanted, like, and a desired outcome, but outcome-based dialectics is probably not the good, not the. It seems like people are more interested in vengeance on NATO than they are with.
So you're saying that people are more interested in violently going after NATO
Yeah.
and seeking, so which would only lead to more death and destruction, right? Seeking out vengeance like that, and responding violently, then they'll respond back violently, and then that cycle will continue. But what you're suggesting is also not pacifism, right? People are getting attacked by people. Of course, you want those people in the Donbass region to protect themselves,
even more,
and do everything they can to stay alive. But the power that we have here in this country, like our taxes are paying for these bombs and the shelling of this region, is we should be going out into the street, letting everybody know as much as we can about how this is. The U.S. is causing this. The reality of this, they're getting bombed right now. Ukraine is bombing this region, these innocent people, using our money. Go ahead, Jack. Sorry.
No, yeah. I forgot exactly what I was going to say, but yeah, I mean, it was just basically like along those lines. But so and that's key, I think, is that let's go over a couple principles real quick. And the first principle being the sacred feminine principle of non-aggression, right? You do not aggress or transgress another, or do anything that could harm another. Basically, do no harm, right? So that's the sacred feminine. Sacred masculine would be self-defense, principle of self-defense. If another has initiated harm against you, you have the right to ward off that attack, whatever it be. Those are, I mean, that's part of natural law there. I mean, that's just laws of nature. So absolutely, the people in those regions have a right for self-defense, just like anyone who's looking with realistic eyes, the situation going on in the Middle East would say that the Palestinians have a right for self-defense. Again, I do not want to equivocate those situations. They are vastly different, but I'm sort of getting at the principle of self-defense, right? It's key. So they absolutely have a right for self-defense.
Yeah, everyone has a right to self-defense. I was with fucking people of Donbass when they were defending themselves from the fucking beast from the fucking west. Let's not fucking mince words here. Those are fucking insanely fucking evil people, right? In the Azov battalion and fucking right sector and all these other fucking douche canoes. Those people are fucking monsters, and the people of Donbass do have the right to defend themselves against that shit, right?
Yeah.
And I was with the fucking people that were fucking forming little fucking tiny militias when they were under invasion by the fucking Russian forces from the east, because they have the right to fucking self-defense. I don't think there's any such thing as a fucking humanitarian fucking bomb or a humanitarian shell or a humanitarian bullet. Like, that's not just, I refuse to fucking believe that.
You don't want Liz Warren's green bombs? You mean you don't want to green up the military?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I was against fucking humanitarian bombs
way to have
back
war.
when it was in Iraq.
Right.
Again, it goes back to that the Bill Hicks quote, or someone who said it was either Hicks or Carlin that said, why don't they just drop food?
Food, not bombs. Wow.
Yeah, food, not bombs. Shout out to that.
Keith McHenry's a beast.
Another logical, I guess logical fallacy and false equivalency people bring up is when they say, oh, well, the U.S. has nukes, therefore all other countries should arm up, strap themselves up in self-defense. And they bring up the analogy that if your neighbor has a gun, you don't completely trust them, you should strap up and have a gun yourself.
That argument sounds straight out of the head of Bill Kristol.
Right, so it's a false
equivalency. Shit. It is.
When you're comparing a nuke, right? And this is what Polly brought up to me earlier. You're comparing a weapon of mass destruction to a gun. But not only that, the first thing that everybody should be advocating for is the complete disarmament of them. Yeah, they shouldn't even exist. They should never have been created.
Yeah.
So, and that goes hand in hand with the nuclear energy industry as well, Franco. From the fact that the waste, the toxic waste, is then used for DU and also for all sorts of like dirty bombs, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Some people might be saying, "Oh, well, they exist now, so we gotta those countries gotta defend themselves. They need to strap up." Why not have everybody advocate for the disarmament of them?
Yeah, that sounds like another shortcut. That sounds like arming another fucking contending power to balance the power with, like, there's a lot of mental gymnastics in that, I think.
There's an argument of like pistols versus flamethrowers in here as well, right?
Yeah, like if I fire a shot from a 223, that is aimed at one person, and that will take out that one person. And if I miss, it could take out a couple more, right? But a nuke, we're talking about a destruction of an area for millions of years. Like, the fallout from fucking, like, I think it's pretty fucking clear. Like, I don't understand why that. I don't understand why people are still arguing for nukes. Like, just like I said, my power is to defund the fucking Nazis that have fucking weapons. my power is also to disarm the fucking crazy people at the top that have nukes, man. Like, and the power industry is just waste and fucking the whoopsies, just the whoopsies. There's gonna be a margin of error, and just the fucking whoopsies is toxic for fucking how long is the half-life of plutonium or uranium? Like, I don't know, but
shit ton. There's still in Chernobyl, it's insane. But just really quick, I highly recommend everyone check out an amazing documentary. It's a motion picture sound live performance done by a group called The Acid. The documentary is called The Bomb, and it goes through and it shows armies marching, all of the lyrics the guy is singing to what's going on the screen. It is an anti-nuke doc, and it's a great documentary because you see the impact of nukes, how they're made, how they were like invented. But it's not like a documentary where you have a narrative. The narrator is the singer, the artist, actually going like he's singing "We Could Be Fools," like that's what he's singing. He's singing "We Could Be Fools" right during the part where he's showing people marching and like everyone with their nationalistic, militaristic pride and hubris. So I just highly recommend that. It's an absolute amazing documentary.
I want to bring this up here, and like I'm not calling you out, Calamity. Like I just want to talk about this point that you're bringing up here. I don't endorse nukes, and no country should have them, but I certainly also see the logic that countries want them to avoid U.S. bullying. Well, countries have constructed nukes, and that hasn't stopped U.S. bullying. What that has led to is the development of more nukes from the U.S., which caused all these other countries to develop more nukes, and in response, the U.S. developed more nukes, and it just became an arms race like that. It hasn't stopped U.S. bullying. What we're saying is that the main thing everybody should be pushing for is not, these countries should arm themselves with nukes. No, we should be advocating for nuclear disarmament. And
this actually
on Twitter, my bad, Jack. I just want to finish up. On Twitter, I put up a tweet recently saying that no country should have any nukes. And immediately, people were responding to me saying that, oh, well, the U.S. is the number one aggressor of that. But I'm not saying that that's not the case. I never said that wasn't the case. They should especially be disarming. When I say no country should have nukes, I mean all countries should not have nukes, including the United States. Why do you need to bring up that, oh, the U.S. is the number one aggressor and that's why all these other countries have nukes? Everybody should disarm. We should be like them arming up with nukes, other countries arming up with nukes has not led to the debullying of the United States. They've just only armed themselves even more. You guys get what I'm saying?
Yeah, this is Einstein's definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result. Like, it's kind of fucking comical, I think. Like, it's another shortcut. Like, yo, the fucking currency is collapsing. Why don't we take advantage of the fact that the currency is collapsing and collapse the empire? Don't fucking argue for another fucking military bloc to like take over power, like, because there's a fucking majority. Like, I need people here to be fucking mobilized to fucking disarm the U.S. I don't need to be fucking telling people to fucking arm up. Like, we're talking about mutually destroyed.
Should be mandatory.
Say what?
I think Dr. Strangelove should be mandatory viewing for all Americans, just because Kubrick covered this exactly the kind of insanity we're seeing right now. Like, mutually assured destruction. MAD is MAD. It's in the acronym.
Madness.
And what kind of sparked in my mind, Franco, is like what you're talking about is like, so if you go back and look at Nikola Tesla and how he was working on this ray that would have been able to shoot down anything. I think the reason why I had this intuition that I feel that he's actually put the hold on a lot of his inventions because he likely felt it, and for good reason, that man was not ready for that. That we would take this technology and because originally, like if you look at what he was saying, he wanted all nations to have this technology, similar to the argument that we're going through right now, right? Similar to what we're talking about nukes, right? So take that same logic, and it makes even more sense when you look at that. Like Tesla probably saw that. He probably saw no, it would have been either in the hands of a few or something like that. And so what he was actually trying to solve to end war, he likely realized that wasn't going to work. Putting more fire on fire doesn't put out fire.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is when other countries start arming themselves with more nukes. Can we understand why they're doing it? Yeah, we can understand why they're doing it. Is it the best approach? We see that it's not. Um, like we have enough nukes now enough to like destroy the world 3 times, or it's probably more now.
Yeah.
So yeah, trying to, like Jack said, if you're trying to protect yourself from fire with more fire, you're just creating more fire.
Well, and then just the manufacturer of the shit is destroying every fucking thing. Like just the manufacturer of nuclear weapons might just destroy the fucking planet.
Yeah, because that toxic waste is what, 20,000 years. I think it's what, 20,000.
So another thing that Calamity's bringing up is the U.S. will never give up its nukes voluntarily. Should that mean that we should stop advocating for the disarmament of it? No. Like, that's what we're doing right here. We can understand why countries are doing that, why they're arming themselves with nukes. And then that, at the same time, we can also advocate for the disarmament of them.
Yeah, like to avoid, and this is like all in good fun and tongue in cheek, right? To avoid a calamity, a worldwide calamity, we should probably move to disarm fucking nukes. And like the boomers were pretty fucking smart about this. Like I don't understand where the mental disconnect is here. They had the fucking correct fucking position the day they came out. Like we need to fucking disarm fucking nukes and not use nuclear technology. Like, and this is.
And people say like, oh, like the US should be the first. They should set the example. Maybe they should, but why not have all of them disarm at the same exact time?
Right.
That's what we should be. If we're consistent about it, no country should have nukes. That means all of them should disarm it all at the same time.
Yeah. And
the only thing I'll add to that is you've got to get rid of the nuclear industry too. You've got to get rid of power plants because otherwise they launder the spent fuel rods for making DU, other uses, dirty bombs, all kinds of shit. But it's the whole industry's dirty. And again, like I had a great conversation with I believe it was Sparky on even looking at like liquid thorium and like different kinds of nuclear reactors. And the problem that he brought up that is absolutely point on is shielding. Like, it doesn't matter what technology you're using, there's going to be radiation coming off of that. And there's going to be some sort of byproduct that you're going to have to try to find a way to clean. So it's that entire industry is dirty. And so like, yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like, do we like, if your house is on fire, do you not try to like get stuff out of the house or like try to like stop that situation or prevent it from happening, or like what do you do? And that's the thing. It's like is the U.S. voluntarily going to give its nukes? If everyone woke up today and realized the insanity that we're all just a second or a button push away from the entire world going kaboom, I think maybe things would change. But again, like it's a good point to bring up.
And if we're saying, oh well, I mean, the U.S. and is purposely suppressing that fear of people and suppressing the advocacy of disarmament, then we have to let other people know about that also. Let people know about U.S. propaganda and propaganda in general.
Yeah.
We should let people know about how the human mind gets affected by propaganda so that we can elevate consciousness. Yeah. How many times have I said that on this show? Elevate consciousness means elevating awareness, elevating awareness of what's happening in the external world and what's happening within yourself in your mind. How your mind gets affected by the external world.
And not get locked into the 5 sense perception prison of, just what's in front of you. It's going to that spiritual level. Because that's the thing, is like occurred to me the other night, just thinking on, is like, if spirituality was more not seen as like this taboo type thing, like, oh, you're one of those people believes in Sky Daddy. It's like, not everyone is that, that specific type of person, but it's like all the generalizations, all of this stuff that pushes people away from spirituality. Because again, there are false teachers and all this kind of shit. But it really occurred to me that if people like if the entire world today said, I'm going to do shadow work and inner work and inner child healing, I'm gonna get rid of all my trauma. I don't foresee a world with war.
Yeah.
Like I know that sounds overly simplistic, but because looking at my own life, like looking at the own shit that I messed up, it took me taking responsibility and accepting what I had done to be able to move forward. But we're in a world where it's like it's just everything keeps getting moved. First, it was the one event that caused the lockdowns. Then it was directly moving on to something else. I mean, the speed of that switch, like, really should have. Like, I felt that alone should have woken people up. But really, like, and it comes down to what we were talking about, Shadow, when we did that last article, is that with the mass formations, right? The fifth missing item on that would be spirituality, because all of the other parts that lead to these mass formation events do not occur if someone is spiritually grounded and knows themselves.
Yeah. Like, I think the position that everyone should be armed so that nobody uses nukes is letting the lizard brain kind of take over, because it's a fear-based model, and it disregards the higher thinking skills. It's a reactionary position, right? Action of nuke, therefore reaction, I nuke. And I think we need to move on past that. I think one of the greatest fucking ways to keep people in a lizard brain is to have everyone fucking armed to the teeth with fucking nukes, right?
Yeah,
because at that point, yeah, and at that point, all you have to fucking do is just pay the fucking dudes with the nukes, and they'll fucking run the goddamn world, right? Like, it's
That's
not
right now.
because it's a logical fallacy to assume that just because someone has nukes to defend themselves, they couldn't use nukes to fucking bully others. Like, because like, if the U.S. is using fucking nukes to fucking bully fucking people, then when the U.S. collapses and those fucking nukes still exist in the places where they just had them to react against the U.S., then of course it's gonna be compared to itself, and it's gonna have to fucking bully too. Like,
so what you're saying also is killing the bully, like, out of vengeance, won't get rid of bullying.
Yes.
Not if you didn't resolve.
In order to get rid of bullying is, getting rid of bullying. Let people know why bullying is not okay and everything, and have people understand why they feel the need to bully, and that they don't need to do that in reality, right?
It really, yeah. Like, we're not breaking a cycle there. We're just it's going to be a bad time the more fucking nukes we get, right? And then, Jesus Christ, if you have a coup, you have some fucking crazy people take over the shit, press the fucking button, then we're all dead anyway. Like, I don't want to advocate for people to continue to live in the fucking lizard brain, right? These all are very manufactured dichotomies to serve masters. I don't think that we should stick around in that mental space and in that conscious space. Like, of course, I can give anyone, like, here's some fucking reasons why I think that this is just another fucking master that's taking over. But really, it does come down to that consciousness level. We have to be able to lift our consciousness away from killing people and taking their shit, because that is the ubiquitous theme throughout all of history. It's killing people to take their shit.
Yeah. I want to give some shout outs real quick and address some comments here from Rockfin. JVB, thank you for the tip. Says cynicism is not effective at organizing human society. You guys seem to be living in a libertarian fantasy. Get real in the real world and stop virtue signaling. It's kind of boring, really. We'll come back to that, JVB, in a little bit. I just want to read the rest of the comments here, but pretty much what you're saying is that we're being too idealistic, I guess, and we're not living in reality, and we should take more practical matters. We'll come back to that. And thank you very much, AREM, for the donation. It's very much appreciated. And Geography Pro says the main question is, we don't know if the U.S. or other countries have defense systems against nukes? Star Wars, anyone? Also, speaking of space weaponry, rods of God is another form of weaponry without the nuclear fallout and waste. So let's answer JVB's thing first, or respond to it. Says that we're being too cynical and also too idealistic and not living in reality. What do you guys say in response to that?
I think that's an invocation of a lizard brain.
But let's explain.
Yeah.
Why?
So I think it's entirely idealistic to believe that there's a good guy and a bad guy, right? Like, the realist position is that there's probably many bad guys that are vying for the fucking power, right? Like, this isn't a Marvel comic series where there's a good guy and a bad guy. This is more like, I don't know, the real world, where there can be 13 drug dealers that are competing for the same fucking corner because it's their fucking economic territory. And every fucking one of them are going to fucking kill, rape, murder, pillage, and steal. But one could be worse than the other. So I guess I should pick a better one? Like, nah, man. Like, I don't want any of those guys to be in power. I mean, I don't... I don't see how it's idealistic to see to see these mass formations, right? Like, I think the realist position is people have to kind of fucking become more than they are now to solve the fucking problems, because we're just broken people with broken isms. Shout out to
so people are reacting on autopilot. They're acting without thinking because people aren't conscious. They're not being mindful of their actions that they're taking and how this can negatively affect them. Right, Jack?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, that's the thing is, I mean, we're just talking in conversational format, just like we would off the air. So it's like, like if it sounds cynical, then, I mean, that's not what we're going for here. This is just to basically go over what our thoughts are on this, and we're really just trying to go through it. I mean, that's the thing, though, is, I mean, if it's cynical to think that we could have change in the world if everyone actually did the inner work and actually did the self work, that wouldn't have an impact, that, there's a, like that, I don't foresee that being a bad thing. And again, like, just throwing out there, like, what are the actual solutions to this? I mean, yeah. I know personally for myself, doing the self work was the only way that I made my life better. So just taking that concept, I would imagine just more people doing that en masse would be pretty massive.
People got to understand what they can have control over and what they can't have control over. Like, we have some limitations. So what can you personally do to improve the situation? Can you personally go and like destroy the nukes, disarm the nukes, or stop all the shelling from happening? You personally, directly like that, no. But you can spread awareness about the reality of the situation, how it's our tax dollars that's causing that.
Yeah.
Then as more people become aware about that, they can say, this is not what I want. They start to understand more about the power that the U.S. oligarchs have. They become more aware of all these other issues that are related to each other, how State Street, Vanguard Group, BlackRock own the weapons industry in addition to pharma, oil, all of these other industries, right? And then they start to understand better what the problem is, that can help them come to an actual solution. The more people that are understanding what the problem is, then the more power we have collectively to actually solve the issue. But you by yourself, we can't just do that, right?
Yeah, because I think just picking another ideology, and a reactionary one at that, there, because this person did this, therefore this person must do this. That's a reactionary ideology. Like, we're not going to get anywhere else but another reaction. The cycle has to be broken, right? And I think the only way that we can actually do that is if we collectively, like, raise that consciousness. Because if we're just going to be arguing for the next fucking cartel to come and save us from this current cartel, we're going to be in a very bad way.
Yeah. So what Polly means is like if we're thinking that Russia or China are going to be our saviors, because we're aware of like the horrible things that the U.S. does. I mean that's being too hopeful.
Yeah,
But
because I can tell you right now, fucking there was some very dirty things that happened in the Central African Republic that were based upon Russia's acquisition of uranium. Um, there was a lot of secret hidden shit because of one, they have uranium, one, they have gold. So that was some pretty classic economic gangster shit, right? Like these people are gangsters. Like we need to start thinking more about governments being gangsters. More recently, Rusal in Jamaica was poisoning the fuck out of a river, and like this is the same thing as I don't think the people in Jamaica give a fuck if Russia poisoned them or Russian companies poison them or US companies poison them. I don't fucking think they're like, "Oh, actually, hold on. I really enjoy that third leg on my fucking child because it was actually from Russia. Thanks, Russia." Like I think that's a really childish way to look at it. I think I'm against the actions. I'm principally against the actions that are being taken. I and the saying, well, how many military bases does fucking Russia or China or whatever the fuck like that? You don't need a fucking maritime military base.
so it's
to fucking yeah.
It's like a logical fallacy to think because the U.S. empire is bad, that means that Russia and China are going to respond benevolently to counter that evil that the U.S. does, and give these other countries pipelines, and they're going to be better. These pipelines will be humanitarian. I mean,
Yeah.
but how do you know that? Where are you getting that information from? Is it from Russia and China? How do you know that they're giving you all the information out there? Just like when you question the U.S. empire, their propaganda, we have to apply that everywhere.
Yeah.
Look at what's happening on the ground in those countries. Like Polly just brought up Jamaica. Plenty of sources that Gloria Jones and several other people on Twitter that I really should amplify more.
Yeah,
Putting out what's happening on these countries: Haiti, Africa, South America.
And let's not forget that river was poisoned due to a mining operation for aluminum bauxite, which is key to some fourth industrial revolution kind of shit, right? Like it just like, and then what also is happening inside of that fucking country over there, martial law, right? Like Russian police now have the same superpowers that our police have. And there's regions that are actually under martial law. When the COVID-19 shit happened in China, they took some very draconian lockdown measures, right? And for me to be opposed to that kind of shit is because I'm principally opposed to that kind of shit. I'm against an action taken by the U.S. and I'm against an action taken by the same action taken by someone else. Like I don't pick sides here. Like I don't understand why people can't take my words when I say that conscription is slavery and like take that for what I said it as. Because if I'm against the draft here, I'm against the soft draft, meaning like economically pushing people into joining the fucking military so they can get their student loans paid or get out of the fucking ghetto or whatever the fuck it is. Like, I hate that shit. And I think every other fucking nation does the same exact fucking thing, whether it's through official drafting or through economic necessity. Like, I hate the draft because it is slavery. That's a fact. That's not an opinion that I have.
Putting somebody in war against their will, and on principle, we should be against making people do something that will cause them harm against their will.
Yeah.
So let's point out another logical fallacy, because some people might say, well, It's their country, it's their business. You shouldn't tell them what to do. We're not exactly telling them what to do. We're saying that we are against it by principle. Am I wrong there? Like we're saying if a country has a draft or is performing certain lockdown measures that are too harsh and are causing depression, or they're doing like a forced vaccination on people, I personally am going to be against that off a principle. Now you could say, oh, but that's their country. They all decided to do that or whatever. Okay, I can understand that that was their decision and all that, but on principle, I'm still against that. Like me personally, like that's what my position is. What's so wrong about bringing that up? That's not me helping the U.S. by saying that. Like, what's it called?
Yeah,
Like the example you brought up earlier, Shadow, Polly. You want to talk about like the example you brought up about Russia and uh, their laws against marijuana and all that. Like, just because we say we're against that doesn't mean that we are helping the U.S. in demonizing these countries in a way to manufacture consent for intervention or whatever.
No, man, like I think that people have human rights. I don't give a fuck what nation state says that they do or do not have them. I don't fucking care about any of that false authority. Like, people have the right to be free of prosecution for victimless fucking crimes. Like, the idea that you can imprison someone and force them to fucking work or force them to go to war or whatever it is for the possession and use of a fucking plant, the fuck out of here. Like, I don't give a fuck who says that. They're wrong. That those people have human fucking rights, regardless of what the fucking nation state said. Like, I don't buy any of that fucking, oh, well, there's this over here, it's actually good to have anti-drug policy because reasons and things and stuff and blah, 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 blah. I don't fucking care. I don't fucking care. No fucking nation state has the right to infringe upon someone's human's fucking rights. Right. I don't give a fuck what the majority said. I don't give a fuck what the minority said. Yeah. Sorry. I'm very fucking angry about all of that shit. Like,
oh yeah,
because
understandable. Yeah.
It's immoral. I've been a part of that fucking the prison industrial system. I can't tell you how many fucking dollars the state of New Mexico fucking stole from me for victimless fucking crimes.
Right.
I hate that shit here. I'm not going to fucking praise it elsewhere and say, well, because I'm a Westerner, my privilege.
Right, like saying that I have no business in saying what they should do or whatever. I mean, you can still say you're by principle, I'm against this. What is wrong with saying that? You're not helping the U.S. to demonize that country. No, like you are objectively calling out the violations of human rights. Go ahead, Jack.
Oh, I was just exactly what you said, Shadow. I mean, just nailed it. Because that's the thing. It's like, it's a freaking plant. And then you look, it's like the fact that a lot of these were like ceremonial plants used in ceremony by peoples whose land was taken through exploitation, violence, murder, rape, pillage, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, like, I mean...
And this is what we are talking about
like
here.
The use
anti-war
of fucking...
is like anti-war by principle. Doesn't matter the country.
Yes. Like, I didn't fucking change my mind because Bill had something and Jeremy... I don't... like, it's mental gymnastics, like, for me at this point. Because I hold these principles. Right? Like, I believe that everyone was fucking born with the fucking right to do what they will with their own fucking body. And I don't fucking care why someone says no, they weren't. Like, I'm not okay with it on principle. Right? Like, I don't change.
And then like if we want to
Principles don't
actually
change.
help the person who's consuming certain, like if the drug that they're taking or whatever it is substance that they're taking is harmful to them, how can we help them out? Raising consciousness, informing them about how this causes harm, ways that they can help themselves if they're in an addictive state, not by
Yeah.
imprisoning them and punishing them. How's that going to help? Right? You raise consciousness. That's
Right.
why I keep bringing that up.
Like, addiction is a medical fucking problem. It's not a fucking criminal one. And I don't care what law code fucking said it was. They can shove that law code right up their fucking ass. It's a violation of someone's fucking rights as a human being that they were born with, for fuck's sake. Like, I refuse to accept a position that one action is correct for one person while it's wrong for another. Like, because this is on a human level. This isn't on a nation state or a national or an ethnic or a whatever the fuck or a religious level. Like, if you want to fucking wear a hijab, cool, man, right on. If you want to wear a burqa, right on. I don't fucking care. You want to force someone else to, go fuck yourself. You don't want to put drugs in your body? That's fine. Someone else wants to put drugs in their body? That's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with any of that. That's not me helping imperialism. That's me just saying I refuse to accept this authority because that authority was illegitimate in the fucking first place. And funny thing about the use of marijuana in the Asian steppes, as far back as the Scythians, they used cannabis for their rituals all across Asia in their worship of a fire god. So it is culturally their identity as well. So yeah, I get a little bit angry about it because I've suffered at the hands of that fucking prison slavery complex.
Well, and this is just another like really quick thing from Jeremy Locke. An easy way. This is one. I think this is one of my favorite definitions, that where he talks about principles versus law. And just real quick, he says a principle is a truth that creates freedom. A law is a lie that creates slavery. Principles describe reality. They are knowledge that help you to make use of your world. Because of your intelligence, you recognize principles in everything you do. Everything you learn is a principle. Movements of your hands, which foods taste good, mathematics, and empathy for a friend are all based on principle. Laws are artificial ideas created by evil men to restrict the thinking and understanding of people. And then just the last part of this: laws mask themselves in authority so that they can impersonate principles. When people mistake law for principle, their freedom is restricted. When people mistake truth for the ideas of authority, their abilities and their wisdoms are diminished. This is the purpose of law.
Yeah. Like, if the majority is hungry for war and the minority refuses war, does that mean that the minority must be forced to fight in the war? Because that's still force. That is still forcing someone to do something against their fucking will for the outcomes of some very fucking few and rich and powerful fucking people.
Right. The interests of the individual should outweigh the interests of what the majority wants when it comes to, things that they do to themselves.
Not
things
necessarily.
that they put in themselves, or things that they, activities they participate in, as long as they're not harming other people.
Yeah. So not yes and no.
Okay.
Because the individual and the collective are a symbiosis, and they must be treated as such. When one takes precedent over the other suffers. Right?
Okay.
It's the true dichotomy. It's the true dialectic. It's the only one that's true. Right? It's the yin yang. It's the seal of Solomon, the balancing of the sacred masculine and feminine, right? Like, all of these things are representations of the true dichotomy, the shadow and the conscious self, right? The collective and then the individual. Like, we have to learn how to function in symbiosis with these things. But just because the collective says that the individual must do something doesn't mean that it's correct. It's still a violation of their human rights that they were born with. What do you think? Because now we're treading into natural law, and that's fucking Jack's favorite fucking field of research. Like, we've been both.
I was going to bring up the Hermetic principles. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that would cover the gender principle, principle of polarity, and a few others. But yeah.
Gotcha.
Like,
we should
again,
do a whole stream on natural law.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, I would highly recommend anyone who is curious about natural law and really just a lot of stuff in general and wants to see someone in 2010 calling out everything we're going through right now, go to whatonearthishappening.com and check out Mark Passio's work, because my mind is blown that he is literally talking about shit that I thought I was the only person that thought that way, or things that I thought I had discovered, only to find out that this not only was it known, but it's been documented and someone was speaking out against it years ago.
Yeah. And like, a lot of my introduction into like the refusal of authority comes from living in a very reservation heavy state and watching the native peoples of this land suffer as they have at the hands of an illegitimate authority known as the United States. I repeat, an illegitimate authority known as the United States. Makes my fucking blood boil when it happens to anyone else, right? Because I'm very fucking intimately acquainted with this shit. The fucking pain in the blood in this fucking soil as a result of the American fucking genocide. That's what it was. It was the American genocide that the United States and other fucking imperial powers imposed upon this land. It's not just here that it's happened, though. We have to be very fucking clear. This has happened all across the fucking planet several fucking times. And it all comes from this fucking idea that we're the chosen ones. And there just happens to fucking be economic interest. That's not important. Let's say that's not important. Like, it always happens this way, and it's been happening for thousands of years. Like, and all these fucking different nation states, empires, superpowers, world powers, whatever the fuck we're going to call them, have been guilty and are found guilty in the course of fucking history for their activity. Like, the Chinese fucking Han chauvinism, even fucking Mao warned about that, right? The phrase woo-woo, when you're derogatorily referring to anything spiritual, is actually a derogatory phrase from the Confucianists, the Han Chinese Confucianists, against the shamanistic tribes and matriarchal societies of Wuhan. Like, it goes back as far as that, goddammit. Like, in Russia, how do you think Russia fucking spanned from Europe to fucking the United States? Was it by carrying the cross and puppy dogs and unicorn farts? No, they did it by fucking conquest, and they murdered millions in the fucking process. Like, these fucking people that run the show are not on the same level as us.
And when people bring up, oh, well, that was like several years ago, like has that happened in the past 50 years? We have to say history didn't stop. Like, history still exists beyond 50 years ago, right? It still needs to be considered.
Yeah. And it still happens now.
Yeah.
Like,
they do it through other means. And the U.S., of course, participates in that as well. Right, but these other countries also do that.
And even the oppressed countries do this to their fucking indigenous people, right? The Brazilian fucking government, they do not respect their fucking indigenous people of the Amazon.
Right.
In Nicaragua, the fucking Sandinistas have never respected the fucking autonomy of the native people. Like, this is something going back, I think Chiapas people had it fucking right. They're like, you go ahead and do whatever the fuck you're going to do over there. and leave us the fuck alone. Right? Like, this is in people, and then in Africa it happens between tribes. Like,
and pointing that out does not mean we're supporting U.S. imperialism. It's addressing a human problem, right? It's not just an imperialist problem. It's a human problem. It's a problem with our state of consciousness. Because if we replace everybody who's in charge right now with different people, how do you know that the new people aren't going to commit the same mistakes? The way you prevent that is to elevate consciousness. It's always going to be that.
Because a fucking collective of individuals with a lizard brain is only going to do lizard brain shit, which is going to fucking kill a whole lot of people and take their shit. Because we're the peons. When we are demoted into the lizard brain fucking thinking, the other people that run the show, the banks and the fucking and the churches and all those different people that have still have their higher consciousness attached, they get to run us around like pawns. And we're still playing the game like we're fucking pawns already.
I said we were going to come back to that point we made earlier about who really runs the show and how they fund everything. So just to close off, let's talk a little bit more about that. Vanguard Group, BlackRock, they're also involved with a lot of Russian companies and industries. Is that correct?
Yes. Like, there's always a central bank running the show. And a lot of times those central banks will cooperate when it's convenient. And then they get fed up with the business deals and they try to branch off and do their own fucking thing. This is how fucking central currencies have collapsed and reformed and collapsed and reformed and collapsed and reformed and collapsed and reformed. There's also always like a religious aspect to it, right? Like, the Protestant fucking people here in the United States carried the fucking civilizing mission of the fucking Bible, right? When China became a unified China, it was under the Confucianist ideal, which is religious, right? When the Caliphate took over a lot of territory, it was based on the teachings of Islam, right? Like, there's always that ultimate lizard brain invoking institution behind shit. But they're just on the take as well. They're making a whole lot of money off the top. I mean, how did Russia become Eastern Orthodox Christian? Because the fucking Turks invaded old Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire, and all those people fled north. And then they started to continue on Third Rome in the north. Like, that's how Moscow became what it is, for fuck's sake. Like, it's Byzantine architecture over there. It's not Eastern architecture. It's Greek architecture. It's Byzantine. Like, and people don't really want to. People don't want to accept these things, but all of those religious ideas are ubiquitous in the fact that they rest upon authority. And authority, the belief of an authority, is the most pernicious religion that has ever existed on this fucking planet. And it hasn't changed for thousands of years. That's what we need to fucking change. Otherwise, we're just reincorporating under a new master. Mm. There is a central bank in Russia that is now competing with the United States, World Bank, IMF fucking cartel. And they're using oil as the fucking wedge to make it happen.
Yeah. And then let's pull this up here. Jack, you still with us here?
Yep.
Yeah,
just a really good quote.
I have the quote up here.
Awesome. So this is just, I'd like everyone just to really think about this quote when looking around on what we're seeing today, because again, this is a quote by Buckminster Fuller. I highly recommend everyone check out his work. All this stuff's actually on YouTube as well. But so the quote is, Dark Ages, so it starts, the Dark Ages still reign over all humanity, and the depth and persistence of this domination are only now becoming clear. This Dark Ages prison has no steel bars, chains, or locks. Instead, it is locked by misinformation and built on misinformation.
Caught up in a plethora of conditioned reflexes and driven by the human ego, both warden and prisoner attempt to meagerly to compete with God. All are intractably skeptical of what they do not understand. We are powerfully imprisoned in these dark ages simply by the terms in which we have been conditioned to think. That's what I see in the world today.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely still are in the dark ages if we consider where we're at consciously. I mean, people are unaware about how they hero worship and are still have this tribalistic mentality and behavior, and it's a distraction from looking at the bigger picture. And by looking at the bigger picture and understanding what the problem is fully, because many of us only understand pieces of the problem. That's the only way we'll come to real solutions. So yeah, we can leave off there, guys. Any final thoughts here before we end the stream?
Yeah, reject the religion of authority.
Mm-hmm.
It is the most
Make love, not war.
Food, not bombs.
Keith
And
McHenry.
food, not bombs. Keith McHenry, shout out.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thanks again for coming on the show, Polly and Jack, and everybody else. As always, stay informed. Take care.
And fuck the state.